What do you think it's like here, being a kid in the hospital? How do we feel? Are we all the same? No. We are each our own, different. Some of us are here for an hour, some of us, months. We all experience different things, but we all share one thing. We all just want to be kids. And that's where you come in. Because of you, we have a new way to play, a new way to make things better. And you helped us get just the right people to make it all happen, including one of the first gaming technology specialists in the country.
Every day I get to come into work and use technology to help kids feel better. This includes gaming on consoles, it also includes 3D printing, and even includes immersive technology such as augmented and virtual reality. Not only do we use this technology for fun, but we also get to use it to help kids get through treatments and for procedure supports so they can heal faster and get home quicker.
It feels like you're a kid again when you're playing video games.
Not only that, because of Child's Play, we also have the world's first child life medical director.
Not only do I get to help develop and manage these programs, I get to promote the mission of child life throughout Children's Hospital Colorado and the community.
And you help us figure out how to do all this even better.
We're conducting research on how we can use these new and emerging technologies to establish best practices to benefit our patients and families, to improve the experiences, and how we can leverage this technology in really fun and innovative ways.
So, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for helping us be kids. Thank you for helping us play. Thank you for helping us heal.
Hey there, this is Winston from Samurai Punk, and this is our game, Justice Sucks Recharged. We're thrilled to be a part of the PAX Indie Showcase. Thank you so much for having us, and we're really excited to get our new game into all of your hands from around the world. So before that, let me tell you a little bit about what this game is. So Justice Sucks Recharged is about Rumbo, the sentient robot vacuum cleaner that is on a quest for revenge through a neo-90s multiverse. So in the game, you'll be visiting a variety of 90s inspired, 90s pop culture inspired worlds, starting with this one called the Cyber Ship, the Cyber Cruise, sorry. And on here, it's a futuristic ship that is run by terrible robots that is being invaded by the Sea Boys, a group of nefarious pop band pirates. So the pirates are on here trying to steal all the goodies and terrorize the passengers of the ship. But you, as a faithful robot vacuum, are not going to stand for that. What you have to do now is hack the gadgets in your environment and use all sorts of everyday objects to fight back against this pirate menace. You see there's all sorts of little robots milling about which have their own behaviors that can help or hinder you in your quest. One thing you may have noticed there, you're just flying into the enemy. Since you're a robot vacuum, you love cleaning. Cleaning is your favorite. As you clean up dirt and blood, it powers up your energy. So you see in the lower left, the red bar is your blood meter. And that will give you access to blood abilities. So I'll explain more when those come up. But yeah, each world in the game has its own sections with their own unique traps and gadgets that you can use against your enemies. See, there's a water puddle, which makes enemies slip, but it can also combine with our elemental system. So what we've endeavored to create here is an action comedy sandbox inspired by the 90s action movies like Jackie Chan movies that we used to love. creating a lot of different tools for players to mess around with and find interesting and hilarious combos to take out their enemies. We really want to encourage replayability as well, and ways for people to share their unique, funny moments and creative methods of dispatching their enemies. We're jumping around a little bit. So in this segment here, we've got a lot more enemies that have appeared. We have different enemy types as well. So you'll see here that the escalation of difficulty that comes as you progress further through the waves of enemies, more enemies will appear and there'll be new types as well. And as you continue to munch your enemies, you're gaining more and more power. And in the larger game, we'll have a progression system where you can unlock different abilities as well. But for the demo, we've got 3 abilities for you. So the ram there flies at the enemies and sends off this AoE shockwave, which is great for mobility and crowd control. So we're going to see the chaos escalate a whole bunch here, flipping in the air. It's absolute madness. But that's what this game is all about. It's like crazy, over-the-top action, surviving against all odds as this tiny little robot vacuum with the heart of gold and a strong sense of justice. Here we're going to finish this up. Send this person into another dimension. And, of course, since you're a robot vacuum, you got to clean up after yourself. Once you've dispatched all your enemies, it's very important to clean up. So at the end of each level, you're challenged with cleaning up all of the mess as fast as you can and as thoroughly as you can. But Little Roombo's having the best time here. He could do this all day. Thanks for watching, and please look forward to being able to play the demo during PAX Online. It'll be available on Steam. And please make sure to wishlist Justice Sucks Recharged. Every wishlist helps. Thank you so much. Stay safe, take care, have fun with our game. Much love, and have a great PAX Online.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Mark Adams with the Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, and our labs are based at the Translational Research Institute on the Princess Alexandra Hospital campus. And my primary research focus is on lung cancer. We're also looking to extend some of the findings that we've made in lung cancer to other solid malignancies, such as colorectal cancer and certain types of breast cancer. So I've been extremely privileged and fortunate to receive funding from Cure Cancer. And this funding was focused on my work to improve the sensitivity of lung cancers to chemotherapy. And that's a lot of what our work is in doing, is finding ways to exploit some of the molecules that might be upregulated in disease or dysfunctional. And if we can target these molecules and combine these targeted agents with chemotherapy, this might be a strategy to improve the effectiveness of chemotherapy and to save a lot of the toxicities that are associated with chemotherapy and improve the health outcomes for our cancer patients. Of course, as an early career researcher, it's extremely challenging to attract funding to drive our research. We don't have immense track records. So this is where funding agencies such as Cure Cancer step in. They really do focus on supporting the early to mid-career researchers to enable us to try and answer some of the research questions that we have, ultimately with the ultimate view of trying to improve the health outcomes for our cancer patients.
Hi, I'm Ted Price of Insomniac Games. On this episode of Game Maker's Notebook, I got to talk at length with one of my best friends in the industry, Brian Fleming. Brian's a co-founder and managing partner at Sucker Punch Games. And we've known each other for a couple decades, and we've been sharing ideas and advice since Sucker Punch was making Sly Cooper and Insomniac was making Ratchet for the PlayStation 2. Today, Brian goes into depth about their massive new game, Ghost of Tsushima, and some of the challenges they face making it. We talk about cultural authenticity. We talk at length about what it was like to create such a giant game. And Brian shares some great advice for up and coming developers. Please join me. Thank you so much for being on the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I will say I love your background, and because it's a real background, and
it is real. Yeah, it's a giant Ghost of Tsushima key art backdrop made just for doing things like this.
That is cool. I will apologize for my background is
never apologize
from your game, and I've loved it, but of course it's virtual and it's not as clean.
It looks terrific. Glad that you made an excellent choice.
Yeah. Well, and there's a reason. I have absolutely loved playing the game, and I've had so much fun playing and just getting lost in a completely different world. I mean, and I will say too that sentiment has been echoed over and over in fantastic reviews.
Yeah.
So congratulations on a spectacular game.
Thank you very much, Ted. It is, as you know, it's kind of a long, dark tunnel working on a game, and it's strange to then emerge and you go this dramatic change in your day-to-day work and your experience of work, because suddenly the thing that you've been working on really pretty quietly and pretty privately for a long time goes suddenly incredibly public, and it's enjoyable and stressful and rewarding, and it's been great. It's been a great couple of weeks.
Well, actually, what were the couple of weeks before launch like for you?
It's nerve-wracking because at this point the games are big enough that you really have to circulate them through to the press about a little more than 2 weeks early, because the game is long enough, and we wanted, we believe that the game is kind of an immersive, meditative experience in some ways. We wanted people to have time to spend with the game. We didn't want the idea of like, hey, you've got 3 days to do your review. We wanted them to have like 2 weeks so that the press could have the same kind of experience that we thought was best for the game. So at that point, you've given the game out to the press and you're just nervous. You're worried about how it's going to be received. There's nothing you can do at that point. The missile has been launched and you're just waiting to see what happens. And then in very quick succession, you have the reviews hit, and then the game goes live, and then you have the whole post-launch universe. Partially you're, hopefully not too many bugs, but you're fixing a few bugs, adding a few little, nice to have features or tweaks to the game. And you're sort of enjoying the reaction of the world community to the work you did. So it's a really strange and very distinctly different month from the 6 years that preceded it while you're working on the game.
6 years. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a long process.
I
It's a
didn't
little
know
winding
that.
road, and we'll tell some of those stories today, I bet. But
Yeah.
it's a long process. That we finished First Light, just about 6 years ago, and knew we wanted to make, something of this scale, something grand, something transportive, and it took us a while to find that. And once we found it, it took us a long time to build it.
Well, did releasing the game in the middle of a pandemic make any difference for you?
Well, it made a ton of differences. And certainly we all went home in early March, and the game wasn't done, certainly in early March, and so we had to final the game from home. And I think, Sucker Punch, a game like this, Sucker Punch is only a part of it, right? I mean, there certainly is the incredible work that our IT guys and really our whole team did, turning our company into a work for home company at the most critical, stressful part of the project. Certainly was not expected, but it worked out okay. And a credit to all the people who are associated with that. But again, that's just Sucker Punch, right? You have other far-flung parts of the world that are involved. We have localization in Latin America and in Spain and Italy that were having really serious coronavirus issues. And all of that is all part Japan. All of that is all part of finishing the game. And so there were not, it's not just the story of Sucker Punch. It's the story of the worldwide localization effort and finding ways to record actors when they can't go into the studio. And it's, super complicated suite of problems. And we really, on the last VO, on the last voiceovers, we didn't even have it when we went out to reviews. Some of those came in very, very close to launch. But to the credit of all involved, everything got recorded and mastered and integrated into the game in time for launch. So pretty fortunate.
It is quite the accomplishment. And I think it's easy for folks to forget just how much, how complex it is to release a game in the first place, right?
Yeah, and
how
every
many
time
people
it's
are
getting
involved?
worse, right? I mean, each one is pushing and testing you in new ways. So, you had to sort of slow down a little bit and be really careful and focus on the critical things that needed to happen. We needed to figure out how to make sure that we'd created a pipeline and a timeline for all that localized audio to come in, and that we didn't crush the teams that were mastering all of that audio. There's a lot to do after it gets recorded. And so you can't just have that all happen on the last day. It all has to, it takes time. And so it was logistically pretty complicated set of things. But again, fortunately, by the time we got to our launch date, everything was ready to go. So it's a good story, but not an easy ending.
Probably not something that we all want to do over and over.
In fact, I told my management that if when we're going gold on our next major game and a worldwide pandemic breaks out, they got to find somebody else to do that one. It's a one-time deal for me.
Man, I'm sure that's not really the case. But I do want to talk about you a little bit, because I think you've managed to fly under the radar a lot in terms of being out there, and because you're always focused on production. And I just would love for the listeners to understand more about your background, how you got into the industry. Do you mind just taking a couple minutes and describing that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I had an early start. I actually, when I was in high school, I was an Apple II sort of, player and hacker, and taught myself programming on that box all the way to learning assembly language, and actually applied for and got a summer job while I was in high school working at Epics. You remember the summer games? So if you ever play California games on the Apple II, two of those events was my first shipped game. So this is back in the late 80s. Then I went off to college. I got a degree in physics, which adds to the mystery, I guess. And I worked at Microsoft after college for a number of years doing commercial software, electronic mail, and did a little bit of work on Windows and a few other things. And then it was there that I met the founding partners of Sucker Punch, Chris Zimmerman, Bruce Oberg, and we went off and started Sucker Punch thereafter. So it was kind of a journey that's come in and out of games over, a 20, 30-year period.
Was there a specific inspiration that moved you into starting Sucker Punch? A goal that you had?
The moment was actually pretty singular now that you ask. There were two things that happened in the same period of time. The first was, and I forget exactly which order it was, but the first was the shipment of Mario 64, a game that had a really profound impact on me. It was the kind of game that I felt like, okay, that's something I could believe that I would change my career to go make that. That I really was affected by that. And of course, our first game, Rocket, is not wildly different from that. You can really feel that inspiration. But the second, equally important and different, was Abe's Odyssey was shipped. And so Abe's Odyssey was the first game that I remember feeling like I was unqualified to compete with, that it was so cinematic and so rich. The transitions between the unbelievable pre-rendered cutscenes and gameplay were so seamless that we did not have that skill set. We did not come from a background of film production, of really anything that would help us do that. And so we were terrified, candidly, of, hey, we'd always, because Chris and Bruce and I, we'd always talked about this would be our thing. And when that game came out, it felt like, holy cow, we may be in trouble. We may not be able to compete with that. And the Nintendo 64, if you remember back then, had cartridges still.
Yeah.
And Abe's Odyssey was on the PlayStation, and it had a CD, which had a much larger capacity and allowed them to do it. So that's why we decided to go then and to target the N64, because we felt like the smaller cartridge form factor, the fact that you couldn't have, an hour of pre-rendered movies on that cartridge, made it more favorable terrain for a bunch of folks like us, where we didn't have that movie making and cinematic background. And we figured we had to enter the market then and there, or we would be left behind. And so that was kind of the two things that combined to make us go and decide to enter and start Sucker Punch and start on the N64.
That's awesome. I will say that I do remember having similar feelings about Abe's Odyssey, and what a beautiful game that was. And
unbelievable work, Lauren and the team, really inspiring for all of us, and created a sense of urgency.
Which is sometimes what we need, right? I mean, we need that sort of that moment to push us over to jump off the cliff.
Yeah.
And clearly you did that. So looking back from the beginning to today, what have been the biggest evolutionary moments for Sucker Punch?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that the most important single change was our first big game, which was Sly. And everything before that we'd done on Rocket was, sort of like getting our MBA and learning how to run a company and doing all that. And Sly, we were fortunate enough, on the strength of some of the work we'd done, to end up in what we consider to be a pretty, dreamlike situation. We were working with Sony first party on a character platforming game, exactly what we wanted to make. And we had to actually be able to do that now. And, it's sort of the dog that caught the car, like, oh my God, we got it. We better be able to deliver. And we had never done, that level of animation. We had to, at that time, we'd never even done skinned characters, so we had a long way to go to get Sly's tail to look soft and to do the quality animation. I think also it was really transformative because Sony had this rich history, in part written by you and your team, of making these great platforming games. And it really allowed Sony, Grady, and some of the people that I know and you work with, to raise our eye lines to say, oh, you don't know how far you are from being ready to ship. Their ability using focus testing, using the great support that the production teams there provide, they really helped us understand the scope of what we needed to accomplish and pushed us to reach those levels. And so, that was the single most important project, that 18-month, whatever it was, window that we went from nothing to shipping Sly. Maybe it was a couple years, but that was really important for the company. We really became, a proper first-party developer, I think, at that point. We made improvements, of course, along that series. And then the second was jumping into Infamous and deciding to do streaming games, big open world games, which was a huge stretch for us again. It also changed our art style a bunch, brought a more, we had done all the Sly work, and the Rocket work was all, stylized and cartoonish and Infamous. While I think there's plenty of exaggeration and superpowers there, it brought a much more realistic tone and really changed the way we told stories. And so a big jump there. And then, of course, Ghost is the next leap. So the pattern there, of course, is your version 1 games tend to be really, really demanding on the team and on yourselves in terms of developing new skills, changing what the sort of organizational knowledge base is in order to achieve your next big goal.
So, well, let's talk about one of those evolutionary points. How did you make the decision to move from Infamous to a brand new IP like Ghost?
I think part of it was pretty easy. The blog post I wrote on launch day, even, like, you could feel it was time to move on from Infamous for us. We'd been working, it's crazy, but we've been working on it for 9 years, almost 10 years in Infamous. And I think creatively, super important that you put yourself in new situations. We felt it in the room. We knew that's what it was time to do. But I don't think we had any hesitation. Like, we didn't think, hey, it could be a sequel to Infamous or going back to Sly. I know that'll disappoint some fans who really want us to go back to Sly, but we really felt like we needed to do something new creatively. We were ready. We had some vague ideas about, we really wanted to work big, that kind of scale. And we really wanted to do something where the core loop involved melee combat, because we felt like that was something that we hadn't done. And it was a good challenge and felt like there was an opportunity there. So that was sort of the genesis of it. And it took us a little while to find Ghost. And then, there was this period of time when we were talking about, various games, and Ghost emerged. And it was just this moment of clarity, I think, for all of us, where, the creative directors, Jason and Nate, and myself and Chris, were all just like, there it is, and it's weird because you've spent all this time, looking at different ideas, but, as much as it sounds like, a screenwriter story, when you know, and we were very certain when we found this invasion and we knew this kind of story that we wanted to tell, it all went down in literally a 24-hour period where you're like, oh, there it is. Okay, well, let's take all those other ideas and clean off the desk. This is the one. And we were absolutely certain, and it really never wavered, but seems to have worked out.
Well, it absolutely did. But I want to kind of go into creative leadership a little bit, because given the size and the complexity of the game and the massive shift that you guys needed to make to create it, how do you get people on board? I mean, how do you, when you have differences of opinion on the creative team or even on the production team, how do you get buy-in? Do you have techniques that you use?
Yeah, I mean, sort of. I mean, I think that, in part, we were just very fortunate, right? Because I think the vision for Ghost, and I went back and looked at the presentation that we did to the team, years ago. And if I gave that presentation today, it is so obviously the game we made. The game did not drift tremendously. We do this chart. One of the ways we tried to explain it, actually, I should back up. So, one of the challenges, of course, is that after I give this presentation to the team, and it's Nate, one of the creative directors, or, myself or Jason or Chris, whenever any of us talks, everybody's trying to get the picture in their head of what it is this game that we're all now talking about is, but those pictures aren't all the same. And so the process of shipping that game, right, is converging everybody's vision of that game into what the game is. And often it's not what I thought or Nate thought, it's what the game kind of showed us that it is, right? You know, you learn from the game itself where the delightful pieces are. And sometimes it's where you thought, sometimes it's really not. And that's part of the journey. But we always try to make up a chart that, for better or worse, we've called the pillars. And so we have on, let's see, on the left side are the 3 or 4 most important things about the game. And then the 3 or 4, what's tier 2 and what's tier 3 and what's tier 4. And, you know, tier 1 for this was melee combat, you know, a sprawling open world, all those things that we knew were important. And the next tier was things like, you know, a progression that took you on the narrative journey that brought you from being a samurai into being, you know, the ghost. It was surprisingly an anthology of side stories was more important to us actually at that point even than the Golden Path. And we felt like that was important for this. And that whole chart, which we produced, you know, a handful of months into the project, with one exception on the 4th column, was exactly the game we made. And so I think we had the fortune on this project of clarity. We really, you know, and I don't know how to explain it, but I just feel like we really understood the game from the beginning. We understood what we were trying to make, and it was just a shared pursuit of that vision. And again, I don't want to present it like we did not have confusion. The story was very difficult for us to get right. You know, getting the player's voice in there and making sure that the characters all resonated. Combat was difficult. We certainly had our share of technical challenges to overcome. All of that is part of the journey, but you know, in a weird way, the project had this gift, which was that it was very clear from the beginning, I think, for most of us. And that really, really helped us.
That is impressive. I can say that my own experience is I don't think we've ever been able to, with a new IP, reach sort of agreement as swiftly about the core elements of the game and what really matters. It usually, so kudos to you. I mean,
it was, you know, I think it's one of those things, right? You know, I mean, like, you know, it's not like you can conjure it on demand, but you have to be able to recognize it when it's there. And this one was very clear from the beginning what we wanted it to be. And of course we found things as we went that fit in that vision. You know, I feel like one of the things that really came as we went farther along the game was this sense of minimal is UI, the wind, all those were not in the original first 2 months inception. But they resonated so closely with the tone of the game we were trying to make, a game that was comfortable with open space